Hey crocheters, this is Shannon with Dogwood Crochet, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet this lovely puff stitch basket. So I will link the written pattern in the description box, but be sure to like and subscribe, and let's get started. So the materials you'll need are a 15mm crochet hook if you're using 2 strands of yarn. If you want to do a single stranded basket, you'll need a 9mm hook. I will be using a 15mm for this video. And then the yarn I'll be using is the Mary Maxim Home yarn. And this is the color taupe. And like I said, I will be using 2 strands of this yarn to make a double-stranded basket, but you could certainly make a single-stranded basket as well. And I just wanted to thank Mary Maxim for gifting me this yarn. All right, so starting out for round 1, I have my 2 strands of yarn here, and I'm just going to be working with them together as if they are one single strand of yarn. So I'm using 2 skeins of yarn. I've got the center pull out of both, and I'm just going to be pulling from both as I'm working. So we're going to start by making a magic circle. So let me just show you how I do it with 1 strand, and then I might kind of have to work my way through it with the 2 strands. But basically, this is what you would do for 1 strand. Pull this 3rd one under the other 2, and then you would chain and start your circle like that. I'm going to be doing this with both strands. So once again, just wrap it around my index finger 3 times. It's hard to get the bulky hook through sometimes, so that's my main struggle with this. But once we get past this, it's pretty smooth sailing. So now I have my 3 groups. Grab these 2 and pull them through, and we're going to chain 2. All right, so we have our magic circle and a chain 2. Now we're going to place 8 half double crochet into the circle. So yarn over, insert a hook into the circle, yarn over, pull up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, technically 3 groups of loops, yarn over, pull through all 3. We're going to do this 8 times for round 1. And the reason that I'm using 2 strands is it just makes the basket a little more stiff and structured. But the way this pattern is written, you could certainly use 1 strand and still have a pretty sturdy basket, especially because this yarn is really good for baskets as well. So we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to pull these tails a little bit so that I don't lose them. All right, 7 and 8. Okay. So now we have our 8 half double crochets. We're going to pull on our tails to close the circle, and you're going to see that one of these groups is going to get tighter while the other one doesn't. So just pull until one starts closing. So you can see this is loose and this one's closing. You want to find the one that's starting to close and pull on that. That'll get this loose one to close first. And that way we can pull on these tails again and it fully closes, just like that. All right, so that's the end of round 1. We should have 8 half double crochet. Now we're going to find the first stitch of the round and slip stitch. Okay, round 2, we're going to chain 2. Now for round 2, we're going to place 2 half double crochet into each stitch of the round. So we should have 16 stitches at the end of round 2. So just like this, just place 2 half double crochets into each stitch. So when we place 2 half double crochets, that could also be considered an increase. So in the next few rounds after this, if I say we're going to work an increase, that also means that we are just doing 2 half double crochet into the same stitch. So we're coming up on our last stitch here. Okay, and this was our slip stitch from the first round. And so just to check, we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So we do have 16 stitches at the end of round 2, so that's perfect. And then we're just going to slip stitch into our first stitch of the round and chain 2. So no matter what size basket you make, this is going to be the base, and you would follow these same steps to increase and create this flat circle. And you could just continue increasing if you wanted to make your base even larger. So now for round 3, we are going to place 1 half double crochet into our first stitch. And then we're going to place 2 half double crochet into our second stitch. So we're going to increase. Now we're going to repeat that pattern. So we're going to place 1 half double crochet into our next stitch. And then we're going to place 2 half double crochet into our next stitch. And we just continue this all the way around until we get to the beginning of the round. So the end of round 3, we should have 24 stitches. So I'm just going to keep working these stitches for round 3, and I will come back when we're ready to start round 4. All right, we're at the end of round 3, and I have 24 stitches around. So we're just going to slip stitch and chain 2. And like I said, if you wanted to, you could keep this as the base of your basket and start working up. If you want it to be smaller, if you want it to be larger, you keep increasing. So the size can be fully customizable just based on what you prefer. So now our repeat for round 4 is we're going to place 1 half double crochet into our first 2 stitches. And then our third stitch, we're going to place an increase, or 2 half double crochet. And we just repeat this around. So groups of 3, the first 2, we're going to place 1 half double crochet in each of these, and then this third one, we're going to place 2 half double crochet. So we have one, and then 2, or an increase. Just like that. And we just repeat this all the way around. At the end of round 4, we should have 32 stitches. So I'm just going to keep working this, and then I'll come back for round 5. All right, so I just finished round 4, and this is going to be the base of my basket. And it's measuring 8 inches in diameter. Now we're going to slip stitch to the first stitch of the round. And then we're going to chain 2, and then we're going to turn like this. So this is really important because we want this pretty part of our base to be facing up. And when we turn, now we're going to be working our basket around like this, so that this is in the inside of the basket facing up. It doesn't matter too much, but it's just kind of my preference for how I want my basket to look, so it's just an extra trick. So now what we're going to do for round 5 is we're going to start working up with our puff stitches. So for our first puff stitch, we're going to yarn over. We're going to place our hook into our first stitch here, and then we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop. So now we have 3 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over, insert our hook back into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. So now, and it's hard to count with this many pieces of yarn, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on the hook now. All right, so we have our first puff, and then we're going to chain 1 to close it. Now we're going to skip over the next stitch of our round, and we're going to work into this stitch here, another puff stitch. So yarn over, insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, 5 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through all 5 loops, and then chain 1. So now you can see we have 2 puff stitches, and we just continue this all the way around. So we're going to skip our next stitch here and work into this next stitch, puff stitch, yarn over, insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert a hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, 5 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through all 5 loops, and chain 1 to close. So that's it. We just continue these puff stitches all the way around our basket until we get to the beginning of the round. So I'm going to continue working these puff stitches off camera, and then I will come back for round 6. Okay, I'm coming up on the end here, and you can see our basket is already starting to take shape, which is really cool. So we should have 3 stitches left. We're going to skip 1 and work into the next one. One last puff stitch. Chain 1. And then we're going to skip over the last stitch here, and then we're going to slip stitch into the top of our first stitch of the round. All right, so that was the end of round 5. So let's count our puff stitches. We should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Perfect. So we have 16 puff stitches at the end of round 5. So we did have 32 of our half double crochets, and because we skipped every other stitch, that's why 32 divided by 2 is 16. So we have 16 puffs. Now we're going to chain 2. And then we are going to work our first puff stitch right here in between our first chain and our first puff from the previous row. So just place our puff stitch right in there. Chain 1. And then we're just going to find that next chain space here and place our next puff stitch in there. And we just continue this all the way around. So I'll find my next chain space and work my next puff stitch. So I'm just going to keep repeating these steps. We just work one puff stitch and a chain 1 for each chain space around. And that's it. So we just repeat this for a total of 4 rounds. So this is round 5, 6, and then 7, 8. So we're going to finish round 8, and then at the end of round 8, I'm going to come back, and then I'll show you how to do the finishing off and the top border of our basket. I'm finishing up round 6. I just wanted to show you what I do when I get to the beginning of the round again. So I just placed my last puff stitch here, and this does look like a bit of a big gap, but we are going to skip over and slip stitch into our first stitch of the round so that we still have 16 puffs. So the end of each round, we're not increasing or decreasing, we're staying the same with 16 puff stitches, and then you can see it will come together. Our chain here is going to start to slant a little bit as we go up, but overall the spacing will be about the same, so don't worry too much once you have slip stitched. So like I said before, keep working these puff stitches until the end of round 8. All right, so I just finished round 8. Now we're ready to start the top border. Here's what our basket is looking like so far. It's really starting to take shape. If you are making a different size, I'd say a good rule of thumb is the same number of rounds for the base and the same number of rounds for the height. So we did 4 rounds for our base, and then we did 4 rounds for our height. So that's just a good rule of thumb if you want similar proportions to mine. Even if you're doing single-stranded, this still applies. So I just finished with a slip stitch to the first stitch of my round, and then we're going to chain 1. Now we're going to single crochet into the first 6 stitches of the round. And this does include our chain spaces. So we just did, the second stitch was the top of a puff. Our third stitch is going to be a chain space here. Fourth stitch is the top of a puff, and so on. All right, so first 6 stitches. So we're going to work into the top of this puff. All right. And then we are going to chain 6. And 6. Then we're going to skip a few stitches here. So we're going to count 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're going to slip stitch into the top of our 10th stitch of the round. Another way you could think of it is we're going to skip 3 stitches, and slip stitch into the top of this puff here. All right, and we're going to continue single crocheting around until our 22nd stitch. So if before this round, if you want to go through and place stitch markers, you'll want to place them in the 6th and the 10th, and then the 22nd and the 26th stitches. So I'm just going to keep working until I get to the 22nd stitch. All right, 21 and then 22. So we're going to work into the top of our 22nd stitch. These are all even numbers, so they should be the tops of puffs and not chain spaces. So we just single crocheted. Now we're going to chain 6 again to make the other loop of our basket. And 6. And then we're going to skip over our next 3 stitches. So 1, 2, 3. And then we are going to slip stitch into the top of this puff stitch here. And there we have our loop. And then we're just going to continue single crocheting around until the end of the round. All right. So we just did our last single crochet, and then we're going to slip stitch into the first single crochet of our round. And now we're going to chain 1. All right, so that was round 9, and now we just have 1 round left to complete this basket. So for round 10, our final round, we are going to slip stitch into each of these stitches here. So starting with this first one, we're just going to slip stitch around. And then we're going to get to our 6th one here. And now we are at our loop. So for our loop, we're going to place 7 single crochets into this chain loop or chain space that we created. So we just work around it just like so. Five, 6, and 7. All right, so we just did 7 single crochets around our loop here, and now it's looking really nice and finished off. And then we're just going to continue to slip stitch into each stitch around. So we just keep going like this for round 10. When we get to the other chain space, we're going to place 7 single crochets into that chain space, and then we'll just finish off by slip stitching into each stitch around until we get to the beginning of the round, and then we'll slip stitch to the first stitch of the round and fasten off and weave in our ends. All right, we are at the end of round 10. Now we just need to slip. Now we're going to finish it off a little bit nicer. You could just slip stitch and fasten off. I'm going to cut my yarn and then we're going to weave in our ends. All right, so I just cut my yarn and now I'm just going to pull this through. Then we're going to go to our first stitch here, and I'm going to place my hook if I can. It might be helpful to get a smaller hook actually. Going to get a smaller hook here, place it through this first stitch and pull it through. Like that. And then I'm going to get my hook and I'm going to find the back loop of this last slip stitch. I'm going to place my hook from behind and up like this through the center of the stitch, and then just pull the yarn tails through to the bottom like that. So that gives it more of a seamless look rather than just slip stitching and then cutting our yarn at the end. And then from here we would weave in our ends. So I think this is easier to do with a crochet hook rather than a yarn needle, just because this yarn is super bulky and we have 2 strands going on here. So I'm just going to use my hook and weave the ends in along this inner edge up here. And then we should be good to go. Is it just me, or does anyone else, is anyone else way more willing to weave in their ends if they're doing it with a crochet hook like this? I don't know, maybe it's just me, but there's something that makes it more approachable or less tedious or something if I just have a hook in my hands as opposed to a yarn needle. I don't know if I'm crazy, but that's been my experience. So I'm just going to keep weaving in a few more times, and then when you're happy with it, cut your ends, and we're all finished. And that's it. Now we have our lovely basket. It's all finished. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And like I said, the written pattern is linked in the description box. It'll have a few different sizes, so it'll write out the instructions for every single size. And yeah, otherwise, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.